Hey folks, how's it going? Bobbin here. I wanted to chat a bit about map sustain in Path of Exile's new Ruthless game mode. So this game mode is quite a bit more difficult in many axes of character power than the base Path of Exile. And one of these very noticeable differences is your ability to sustain maps of your highest tier. So what do I mean by this? I mean like, let's say you have a bunch of white maps and suddenly you get your first yellow map and you're like, yes, this is great. You run your tier 6 yellow map and you get a tier 7 yellow map. And then you get a tier 8 yellow map. Then you run it and then you get no maps at all. And then you're like, well fuck, now I gotta run white maps again to get back up. That's like a failure of map sustain, essentially. And a lot of players are running into this problem playing the new Ruthless game mode because, like all items in the game mode, there's just fewer of them are dropping, and this includes maps. Another sort of added wrinkle to this story is that map rarity directly influences the amount of maps that drop within the map. So in the base game, you have added quality of the map or different mods that make the map more difficult, affecting the item quantity that drops within the map, which still applies here at a slightly lower efficacy, I believe. But you also have item rarity mods in the base game. This does not exist in Ruthless. Instead of modifiers to rarity, you have added map drop chance. And because drops are so low, what this essentially translates to is if you cannot run your highest tier maps at high rarities, like rare, or magic is better than nothing, but you really want to be running your high tier maps rare to maximize map drops from them, then you're not going to sustain that tier. And you're like, oh, okay, well, fine, I'll just alch my maps then. Easy. Well, no, not easy, because you probably don't have any alchemy orbs. Alchemy orbs are quite difficult to obtain in this game mode. I've accumulated a few, but there were many times running yellow and red maps for completion where I had no alchemy orbs. Sort of a useful trick for those of you who don't know, you can use delve fossils on with an alchemical resonator on maps to kind of alch them. You can buy the resonators from Nico still, and these fossils will drop from nodes that target specific items, like drops fire items. So that's excellent when you lack alchemy orbs early on. But even with the alch, its map sustain is better, but it's still quite tenuous. Like it's not like guaranteed. It's quite. You really do have to push. And my solution, there probably are other solutions, or if there are not, will be other solutions in the future, has been Alva missions. So why is Alva so good for map sustain? Well, at face value, the Alva temples have a chance to contain the cartography room, which upgrades the tiers. Or, no, it doesn't. It contains the cartography room, which has several little cartography tables that drop maps. So it's like, yes, maps. This is good. Run Alva, get maps. But a nuance of Alva is that, let's say I have this. Well, let's just grab tier 16 because that's what I would do. Let's say I have this tier 16 map, and I want to run it with Alva. Tier 16 maps have an item level or monster level of 83. So if I ran Alva missions in this monster level 83 zone, I would basically lock in that item level for my temple. And in doing so, I could then run I don't know, 2 strand maps at tier 1 to fill out the rest of the temple. And bada bing, bada boom, you've got a full temple. You only spent 1 tier, or 1 map of your highest tier, and the temple is the item level of your highest tier map. So this essentially, if you time it right, and it's a little clunky to work with because you kind of have to farm the Atlas missions for the different tiers, which can be another added constraint. Like you can't run Alva on a tier 16 map if you have no red Alva missions, so you do need to be able to do that. But this essentially means for every map you run an Alva mission on of your highest tier, you get a full temple of that tier, which is just excellent value as far as map drops are concerned, because the cartography room, should you get it, and you should get it, you should prioritize it over all other rooms because you are effectively doing this for map sustain, will sustain the temple, or it will sustain your ability to continue this strategy in addition to other useful drops that the temple has. So sort of a key part of this strategy is the Atlas skill tree. In general, you want all the flat chance for additional Alva missions on completion with this strategy. So that involves this notable here, it involves pathing through these small passives here, around to this notable. Artifacts of the Vow is probably the highest value notable on the tree for Alva, simply because it allows you to run one fewer Alva mission to complete your temple. So normally you need like 12 incursions to complete the temple, and Alva has 3 missions, or 3 incursions per map, meaning you have to run 4 times 3 to fill out the temple. But if she has 4, you only have to run 3. It's like a free Alva every 3 maps that you run her on. It's excellent. You probably also want the resource reallocation and contested development notables. Contested development is just useful for flipping rooms that you don't really care about, and to hopefully more useful ones. Resource reallocation is nerfed compared to the base game, but I would say still quite good, simply because there are many rooms that don't have their full effect at tier 2, and having a chance, even a smaller chance, to get them to tier 3 is quite valuable, simply because they're not going to do anything. Like the Altar of Corruption that double corrupts an item or white sockets it doesn't do anything at tier 2. It only has that effect at tier 3. So there's several other rooms like that you really want them to be tier 3 for maximum effect. And then in Ruthless specifically, time dilation is sort of mandatory. And the small passives leading up to it are pretty good too, because you get extra Alva mission chance. But when you're first hitting maps and trying to sustain, you're probably on very scuffed gear and very scuffed gem links, possibly with like no support gems. Like I went into maps I think with 1 support gem for my main skill, which is luckier than some go in with none. So it's pretty important to get the time gained from kills is doubled for incursions in your maps, or you're simply not going to complete the incursions. If you can't complete the incursions, what's the point of running the temple, right? Like, you have to be able to get through that. Yeah, you're just not doing a lot of damage in this game mode. You need this, especially early on. You could maybe drop it later, but I mean, even now, I do this on tier 16s on a pretty well fleshed out character, and it's still a challenge at times. So I highly recommend that node. Archaeology Tour. This is a bit. It seems very good at face value, but the issue is master missions from completing your maps actually compete with chance for a Kirak mission as well. So Kirak is probably the most important master, simply because it's a major way to progress your Atlas completion, and progressing your Atlas completion means more points on this skill tree to get all the things you want. So it's quite important, I would say, that early on you don't take this notable and focus on the Kirak chance on completion nodes, because if you get those, they eventually pay out more points in the end, essentially. I think Kirak's also excellent for unique maps, but I digress. This is about Alva. So later on, I do take this. Like, I think I finished all maps that are not unique, so I finally spec'd this, and it seems quite good. But those are all of the Atlas notables related to Alva that I think are important for this strategy. There are several rooms that I think you need to prioritize for this strategy as well. The first of which I think is somewhat self-explanatory. The cartography room, you want it as high tier as possible. Higher tier means more cartography tables that drop maps. More maps means you can sustain the strategy, and the cycle continues. But in addition to that, you also want to prioritize getting the workshop or factory upgrade. I forget what it's called at tier 2, but it's the room that increases the item quantity within the temple. And this is just excellent all around, because more items is, well, excellent all around, including maps. Maps are good. Those two, I would say, are the important ones for map sustain in the temple. Beyond that, there are a few rooms I like to prioritize or avoid for the Ruthless game mode. So I think the third best one, and it's not straightforward. You could have one room might be better depending on your build or playstyle. But for Ruthless, I think the unique flip room is quite excellent. And at face value, flipping a unique is always good because it's a semi-targeted way of getting specific gear. But in Ruthless, you don't get many items. You really don't get many rare items. And of the few rare items you get, even fewer of them are jewelry items. So you are very, I think I went into maps with all rare belt, amulet, ring. I just had not dropped a rare jewelry item. It's quite difficult to get rare items in these slots, and because they drop so infrequently, you're really unlikely to have an excellent jewelry item in Ruthless. That's where uniques come in. Because your pool of jewelry is so shitty effectively, there are many unique rings, belts, and amulets that are just decent and pretty low rarity and high likelihood to get from the unique flip. So I think it's called the Apex of Sacrifice, or the Sacrifice Chamber. It needs to be at least tier 2 or 3 in order to flip it into unique of the same gear category, essentially a free ancient orb. But I'm trying to think of some of the easy ones, like Carnage Heart, very low rarity, super excellent early on to fill out attribute requirements and LA resistances, even better if you happen to leech. There are many really good rings. I've got both of these Ventur's Gambles from doing unique flips in the temple. You gotta get kinda lucky with the Ventur's, but they can be quite powerful if rolled well. Also, Kikazaru, I use this for bossing and really tough content. This is excellent on a Righteous Spire character, but the 60% reduced effect of curses is good on most characters, to be honest. There are several other useful rings that I don't have here to showcase, but like Le Hoop of All is another excellent one. You can get up to 30 attributes, 30 LE resists. Rarity is also excellent because you don't get implicit rarity bonuses from modifiers on maps. Thieves' Torment is fine early on when you don't have anything good at all. Highwayman is also pretty okay. There's many just very passable rings, I would say, that it seems bad, but hey, it has life and cold resistance. That's more than most magic rings, right? So it's yeah, these rings aren't great in the base game, but just getting them, having the capability to target a specific slot is quite powerful. For amulets, I said Carnage Heart. There's Anvil's fine. Several useful ones. There's also Bisco's Collar, I believe, which is an increased... It's basically a magic find amulet for quantity and rarity from specific rarities of monsters. So that can be quite good to push magic find early on when you're really lacking gear. There's many very useful belts. I was fortunate enough to get an Immortal Flesh off of a Temple Flip, which is one of the best belts I can hope for a Righteous Spire character. several others. I mean, I used Siegebreaker for a long time just because it had life and chaos resistance. Like, it was pretty good. So, especially when magic items are sort of the baseline, most of these uniques tend to excel. I haven't really been flipping amulets just because this amulet is quite excellent. But I digress. I think you sort of get the point that unique flip can be quite powerful, specifically in Ruthless and specifically on jewelry. That being said, maybe your build has better things it can flip. Like, I'm not. You do what you want to do, but to me that seems quite good. Moving on, I think the fourth most important room, especially in Ruthless, again, is the Thaumaturgy room. So, at Tier 3, the Doriani's Institute Thaumaturgy room contains the Lapidary Lens, which allows you to double corrupt a gem, basically. So you really want to save your level 20 gems for that room only. Like, don't use Val Orbs on your level 20 gems. Only use the Doriani's Institute, because if you're really pushing tempo, you're gonna get enough of them eventually, and you need your Val Orbs for map completion because you have to corrupt red maps that are rare to get the bonus objective and get the Atlas skill tree point. So do not Val your level 20 gems. Another added thing to this actually is that gems level up way slower, so there's even more of a cost to just valing them, because the Lapidary Lens basically is like 2 Val Orbs. So you have almost double, it's not quite double because you could add a level and then drop a level, but almost double chance to get a level 21 gem. Or if you have no quality, maybe increase some quality as well. Like, there's many things that work there. In addition to the double corrupt at level 3, even if you don't have the gem room at level 3, it's still pretty good because it contains a thaumaturgy vessel for each level. And these contain gems. And in Ruthless, support gems are drop only, and reservation skills, with the exception of Blood and Sand, are drop only. So getting some gems is really good. Like, if you're going into maps on a scuffed, like, 2 link, getting one more support for your main skill can be like a massive DPS increase and can drastically improve, like, the rate at which you clear content. So the gem room is really important early on to, like, get those gems from the thaumaturgy vessels, but it's also important later for the double corrupt at Tier 3. So overall, a very useful room. Beyond those 4 rooms, I tend to just do whatever I feel like. Overall, I avoid rooms that are likely to get me killed in the temple. So like the minus max res room, I don't think the reward is quite good because you can double corrupt an item, but unless you have an item ready to double corrupt or turn into white sockets, it's really not worth it because it's gonna get you killed, at least in a monster level 83 zone, having like minus 11 max resistances or whatever. I tend to avoid the physical as extra damage rooms, like the physical as extra fire, lightning, or cold, or the monsters heal, or the minions room that increases damage of monsters throughout the temple. I basically try to avoid all the damage mods. It's okay if you can't, but you are more likely to die, and dying in Ruthless is pretty fucking ruthless because you lose 10% of your XP bar, and XP progression is halted to a crawl in this game mode. Like, well, level 93, I think if I got, you lose 10% on death. If I died, it would probably represent 2 to 3 hours of my time. Like, it's not, you do not want to die. To say the least. I think that's most of what I had to say about Alva Temple. Oh, no, there are 2 more rooms I'm thinking of that are actually quite useful. So the Tempest Generator, I would prioritize both of these rooms after the gem room, but I think after the first two rooms, so you prioritize the map room first, then you prioritize the item yield room, and then it gets kind of murky. I prefer the unique flip and then the gems, but it's kind of preference, you know, like whatever you want to go for. The Tempest Generator is it can be a very good room. So at tier 1 and 2, it's not incredibly useful. It just adds like a buff or debuff Tempest. But at tier 3, you either get Radiant Tempests, which give you increased item quantity and rarity. Excellent, of course. Or a Corrupting Tempest, which corrupts items you find. And the Radiant one, I think, is quite obviously a bit better. But the Corrupting one can be quite good because you don't have to ID all the items you pick up, and you can get 6-link items from doing this. It's not frequent, but it does happen, and you can, if your build can use it, great. That's a 6-link, better than nothing. And if it can't, it's 20 fusings, which is also excellent. So, you know, like, Tempest Generator is pretty good. Torment Cells at 1 and 2, again, not super useful. It just adds some Tormented Spirits. But at level 3, you're actually going to get all the unique monsters possessed by a Tormented Spirit. And so if you have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Did I count that right? 6. Yeah, 11, not including the Apex. I almost always skip the Apex, but if there's a unique you need, then go for it. But if you have 11 rooms with an Architect in it, like, and it's possessed, it's usually going to drop at least like a rare item or 2 extra. It's like 10 to 20 extra rare items. Like, that's pretty good. In addition to that, and this gets a little hectic, but it is worth it if you can take it. If you have Torment Cells at level 3, the room itself will be filled with Tormented Spirits. And if you can chase them into the middle of the room to possess the Architect, I think the highest I've had is like a 6 Tormented Spirit possessed Architect, which is wild. Like, it will kill you quickly, and you have to like kite a lot to not die. But if you kill it, the loot is excellent. Like, it's a loot explosion. More than half the time, it'll drop a unique item or 2, several rares, usually some currency. I think it depends on the spirit possessing it, though. So that's kind of a hidden loot goblin if you're able to play your cards right at a tier 3 Torment Cells. There's also, I think it's called Barracks or something. It's not here. But there's a room that increases pack size, which is, more monsters that can drop more things. So it's like, yeah, pack size is good too.